Thanks, Nathan, and thanks, McKinnon, for the opportunity to talk to you guys tonight. As I was saying briefly there to Ian, it's we certainly feel for everyone in Melbourne. The basketball community, but the broader community. We're fortunate in the impact hasn't been as significant in the way we live our lives. So, I do want to send the thoughts and support of all involved with Basketball Australia to everyone at McKinnon and throughout Melbourne. Tonight we're going to talk about how we as coaches can support athletes, and particularly young athletes. So I've just got some slides to go through and present, and then if there's any questions, as Nathan said, we'll certainly cover those off. So let me just share my screen and get a bit organised here. Okay, one of the big elements in coaching now, and one of the real important traits that we're talking to our high performance coaches here at the Centre of Excellence, junior national team and our Opals and Boomers, is the importance of reflection as a coach. And when we're talking about how we can best support our athletes and our young players, I think it's important just to spend some time in thought about, why do you coach? Why did you start coaching? And what's your prime driver and motivations in coaching? And what's important to you as a coach? I think that if you've got some really strong self-awareness through reflection on those two questions, that allows you to be authentic, and that's one of the most important things in all of coaching is you're authentic. You're your true self when you're coaching. So when I was putting this together, I thought, well, what are my three key elements of coaching? And they've changed. They've changed over the years. When you first start coaching, it's really just, you want to help, you want to give back, you want to support your local association or your local club. Then you start developing a real passion for it. And unfortunately, sometimes it can become a bit more about you then. I think you start with really holistic and pure intentions just to help and be a positive role model and influence. But as you get more knowledge and as you get more experience, sometimes you can make it a bit about you. So I think where I've arrived now, the three elements for me is, can I create a caring learning environment, with a big focus on learning? Can I be responsible for growth of young players? I think the next one is knowing your players. Building really strong relationships is important, and we'll talk about it as we go on. But as we come out of COVID and we come out of the challenges, and we spoke about how in Melbourne you're still dealing very much with them every day. Those relationships and the ability to be empathetic, authentic, and show a genuine interest in your players is so important. And the last one, again, is linked to the current challenges that we have. I want to build a sense of community. Australian sport's been built on community. It's been built on local associations and local clubs and volunteers banding together, and most of you on this call, maybe all of you on this call except Nathan, are volunteers in your basketball. You've got a real job, unlike me. So I think building a community is important, and if your coaching leads to really building a community around your team, around your club, around your association, you've achieved something special. So now, how do we as coaches help our athletes manage their well-being. Obviously, we'll talk about the physical well-being, we'll talk about the emotional well-being, mental health, some of these things. And I'm not professing to be an expert. I'm not professing to be a healthcare professional. I'm not sure if we've got any healthcare professionals on the Zoom. I just want to talk from a common sense platform about things that we can easily do in our day-to-day coaching and from our authentic personalities. Actually, we're having a really positive influence on the overall well-being of our young players. And when I say young players, everyone that's still playing is young to me. I'm an old man. So if you're coaching seniors, this still pertains to you. If you're coaching under 10s and under 12s, it pertains to you too, because we're dealing with people that play basketball. Too often we talk about the players and everything's about the players and the athletes. Well, we need to always remember that they're people before they're players, and that's who we coach. We coach the people who play basketball. We know in Melbourne, when you're functioning and you're not being restricted as you are now, that it's a hugely busy basketball environment. Kids are playing multiple games a week. They've got multiple trainings. They might be playing in a school competition. They might be in a program like the SDP. So we have to really provide leadership and have realistic expectations with their physical well-being. We have to know what else they're doing. What else did they do today? So when they get to your training, you should have awareness of what else they've done today. And people say, well, how do you find that? Well, one of the big themes of this presentation will be 2 words: more conversations. You need to ask more questions and have more conversations with your players. Don't assume. You might have a Thursday night training, and by the time that young player gets to your training at a secondary college at the back of Brighton, it might be their 7th or 8th basketball activity for the week, and it's Thursday. So, we need to be cognizant of that, and we need to ask questions and have a good understanding of what they've done. It's important to seek advice. As I said, I'm not a healthcare professional and certainly not an expert in the field, but I am inquisitive. I am curious. I do like to ask questions and talk to people smarter than me. So, if you've got friends or in your social circle that are physios or doctors or osteos, just, tell them that you coach, tell them the age group that you coach, just ask some questions so you can just improve your knowledge on how best you can look after growing bodies and developing adolescents, because that's really, really, really important. No one expects you to become an expert. In terms of the human body and injury maintenance and injury prevention, all these things. But a little bit of knowledge is not a dangerous thing. When it comes to coaching, any knowledge is valuable. And if you're expanding your knowledge on how you can assist in the welfare of young players physically, that's got to be a positive thing. You need to be the adult. We're all kids at one stage, and whether it was basketball or football or netball, we all wanted to do everything. We wanted to be in every team. We wanted to go to every training. We wanted to be in every program and take every opportunity. You would hope that parents, play a positive role, and as we know, for the most part, they do. But we know also that parents want their children to have every opportunity in life. We all do as parents. So as a coach, you've got to be the adult sometimes. They'll want to do everything. And if you know that Thursday night training is going to be their 7th basketball activity for the week, be the adult and say, hey, John, you don't need to come to this practice. I know you want to come, but why don't you just go home, get some rest, have a nice meal, catch up on homework, and then we'll see you at the game on Friday night. If you're able to do that, you're going to win the trust of the athletes, and you're going to take a small step to helping manage, growing bodies and fatigue and all those things. Because not everyone will be the adult, as we know. No one wants to be the person to give ground. I face this in my job all the time when I talk to coaches about young athletes. They say, why should I be the one to give ground? Why should I be the one? And, I just repeat that question back to them. I said, this is what you just asked me. This is what you just said. Why should I, as the adult, be the one who has to sacrifice for this 15-year-old child? And if you do say it to yourself and hear you say it out loud and reflect on it, it's a bit of a selfish attitude. So I think that's a really important one, particularly in the physical well-being. And again, we spoke about have more conversations with players. I had a coach say to me, I didn't know they were doing all this. I said, and they said, how could I possibly know? I said, did you ask any questions? Oh, it's not my job. Well, I suggest it is your job. If you're being charged with the duty of care to coach, whatever age, whether they be 9-year-olds or 27-year-olds that are trying to manage a job, a career, a mortgage, a young family, it certainly is your job to ask questions and see how they are physically. This is obviously a big one in our society now. And again, I don't profess to be an expert in the field, but I think mental health and mental well-being and mental illness has touched all of us to some level in society now. And, we'll talk soon a little bit more specifically about COVID, but it's now more important than ever. We see in the media the impact it's having on young people. So as a coach at any level, whether you're coaching the Brighton Wolves under 10 girls or the championship men, you need to be cognizant of the mental well-being of the players that you have that duty of care. One of the ways that we encourage our coaches at all levels of the sport to manage this is what we call flight path coaching. Often we're dealing with the soundbite generation. For anyone that's got kids, they don't listen to a full song. They don't watch a full movie. They don't watch a full TV show. They live in sound bites. They're on to the next thing. Their ability to consume information is far better than it was when we were their age. People say, they're distracted easily. No, I don't agree with that. I just think they've got a huge capacity to take on information, because now with digital media, mobile phones, all those things, the access to information has never been greater. So we have to adjust, have less meetings, ask more questions, and engage in flight path conversations. What do we mean by that? Well, just get across their flight path. So as they're coming into practice, rather than you checking your last emails or maybe having the last check of Facebook on your phone before you start practice, put the phone away, and as they walk in, just walk over them, say, hi, Sarah, how are you? How'd that test go? Just try and engage them with some questions, and don't stay for long. Engage them, show that you're interested, and then move on to someone else. And if you can do that, what you'll find yourself as a coach, you're having more touch points with more players more often. Players don't want, at most levels, to sit down and have a meeting with the coach. It'd be like saying you're really looking forward to going to the principal's office. But if you can just start those little conversations, keep it lighthearted, make sure you're asking questions, I think that's hugely valuable. There's a photo there of Luke Longley, who, of course, NBA champion and an icon of Australian basketball. He just spent the last 4 years as an assistant coach with the Boomers, and that photo sums it up. he just found a way to have a lot of conversations with players. The trust that he built, of course, he already had great respect for them for his achievements, but we all learned so much from Luke about his ability to create and maintain and build on relationships. He just was always having chats. And that might sound a very simple thing, but it made him special as a coach, and it really had a positive impact on what he did with the Boomers program. If you see it or you sense it, you've got to act. Start a conversation. It might simply be, hey, Sarah, you seem a bit flat today. Everything going okay? Just ask a conversation. Don't be intimidated by that. Don't think that you're, prying into their business. I know as a young coach, sometimes I felt I was doing that. Oh, that's none of my business. They don't want me to be in their personal life. I need to stay out. And yeah, we need to respect their privacy. But I think that's a bit of a cop-out. So if you see it or you sense it, there's something not quite right. Depending on the age of the athlete, if it's a younger player, you might start that conversation with their parents. If it's an adolescent and you haven't got a connection, you might make a subtle inquiry through a close friend or a teammate. But I think that's really important. No longer can we say, hey, I'm just the coach. That's not my responsibility. 100%, this is our responsibility as a coaching cohort. Let the players know it's okay to speak about their problems. In Australian society, and this is one of the challenges that we have, especially with young males and not so young males, it's seen somewhat as weak to speak about problems. It was really refreshing yesterday to see Paul George, the LA Clippers superstar, in an interview, not try and find excuses, just said, look, I'm really struggling. I'm in this bubble. I miss those important to me. And that's someone at the top of their powers that could quite easily, brushed it off as a few bad games or an injury, but, wanted to share that. So I think for us as leaders, and that's what we are as coaches, we need to let young players know that it's okay to share. I think it's important the landscape. Is it a big exam time? Is it a heavy study load? What other stresses are there? And the only way, again, that you can do that is ask questions, be inquisitive. We say all the time, I'm not being critical, I'm just being curious. And the best coaches at every level are curious. They want to know. They want to know more about what's important to their players. And involve your staff. If you're lucky enough to have an assistant coach, most of you would have a team manager. In the older age groups, you might even have 2 assistant coaches. Involve them in the conversation as well, and make sure, as your role as a leader, that you're encouraging them to have more conversations. You're encouraging them to play a really positive impact in managing the mental well-being of your players. So we know that, this is a once in a century event, and we're certainly not flippant about the impacts of COVID on society, and particularly not for Melbourne at the moment, as you've had to endure a longer period of isolation and some challenges. So, but once we're through it, and we will be through it, we've got to consider the impacts of COVID on young athletes or young people in general. COVID's taken away routine, in so many areas of their life, whether that's the routine of getting up every day, going to school. In a basketball sense, it's being super organised with mum or dad to get to various trainings and to get to that 6:40 game at Eltham from McKinnon, and how we're going to do that. So we've got to be cognizant that's a massive change, even once they come back to organised basketball. there's a lot less structure in their lives, and it's linked to routine. So they're, from a young age, my daughter is now playing under 12s rep basketballs, and she knows she has to pack her bag, 2 nights a week, because we take her straight from school to practice and those things. And we like them having that routine, and we like them having that structure, and it's a great life lesson. Well, that's been taken away for so many young people, which impacts their motivation. And I'm sure that many of you with children are trying to manage and understand this, that, there's a sense of, oh, well, what's the use, because this thing drags on. And changing priorities. What we found, and certainly, again, not being flippant, but in some of the states and territories that have returned to basketball, the motivation and the priorities have changed for young players. Some can't wait. Some are jumping out of their skin to get back in. But there has been an amount of that they've just lost interest, or they're struggling to gain the energy or the motivation to get back into that cycle of multiple trainings and multiple games and maybe early starts and whatever else. So it's important that we don't pass judgment on that. Everyone in society will have change priorities coming out of this pandemic. So we need to be cognizant of that with young players. Sleep habits and sleep quality is being impacted. A sense of loneliness is something that's pretty common in our research and in our conversations with healthcare professionals and even Olympic athletes. They're used to the team setting, they're used to the camaraderie, they're used to that routine of being able to be with people at practice and then go off and have a coffee. And it's the same for young players, that there'll be a sense of loneliness coming out of this. In the basketball setting, they've been involved in team sport for some of them since they're 6 or 7 years old. And this is the first extended time that they haven't felt a sense of belonging. They haven't felt a sense of being part of something bigger than themselves. And we know that academically it's a challenge, and the education departments have done phenomenal jobs in making changes and supporting and understanding the situation. But all those are obvious, and you might think, well, I see enough of this on the news. Why is he talking about this? But coaches are going to have a significant role to play when we're able to return to basketball, and when we've got to spend some time with young people and try and be role models. Being cognizant of these things after, as I said, a once-in-a-century event is going to be a big part of coaching in 2021 and beyond. So what can coaches do? And a lot of coaches over the time, and I was guilty of this, midway through my coaching career, I'd say, hey, that's not my responsibility. I'm just the coach. I take care of everything that happens out there between the lines. Everything else is the team manager, it's the parents, or it's the administrator. That's not my job. That's a naive approach. Coaches have a significant influence on people in general, and you don't want to run away from that responsibility. So you've got to find the energy to touch base. Again, more conversations. I know often you're running in, you've fought traffic getting across Melbourne, and you're at some high school gym, in the southern suburbs, and you're trying to organise practice, and you're thinking about what you've got to do that night and the emails you've got to send. You've got to find energy to touch base. You've got to find energy to walk on that floor instead of having your nose in your phone. Have those flight path conversations with young players. Involve the families. There's not a parent on the planet that doesn't want to be part of supporting and fostering and helping their child grow. So, don't see parents as the enemy. If you coach junior sport, that's a path to ruination. If you think parents are the enemy and you create somewhat of a line in the sand or an us against it. That's the only people that suffer in that environment are the players, and they're the single most important people in any conversation when it comes to coaching. Devote some time to wellbeing management, and that might simply be, before practice, rather than get straight into your 5-man weaves or whatever else, is just, get the kids down and just have a chat. Just try and get a feel for where they're at. Not having 5 minutes out of that 75-minute session is not going to have a huge impact on your win and loss on Friday night or your win and loss on Saturday in local competition. Being an educator is really important. And again, most of you, or not all, if not all of you, are volunteers. So, you're managing full-time jobs, families, other kids that may be playing soccer or netball or hockey or whatever it might be. But as a coach, you've got to embrace the role of being an educator. So talk to the kids about the importance of sleep. Talk to them about basic nutrition. Encourage them to have some non-phone time. All these things that no doubt their parents are doing, but as a coach, you're going to have an influence because you've got that magic thing called court time. And you've also got their respect and their trust. So, be serious about that role, about being an educator. And I think that's really, really important. I think it's also important for you to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. Demonstrate your value in holistic wellbeing. How do you do that? Well, cancel a training run. If you get a sense that the kids are just over it and you're in the middle of a Melbourne winter and they've been playing basketball for 15 weeks in a row, just say, hey guys, why don't you take Tuesday night off and then we'll see you all at practice on Thursday. You're not letting them down by do that. I think sometimes the best thing we can do, the best gift we can provide young players is time. Just some time for themselves, just some time for their families, just some time for that. I'm not saying every second week we cancel practice, but, back up. You can talk it, but you've got to walk it too. I'm all about, you can't say you're all about the players and then know that every Thursday, Lisa's coming to her 8th practice or game since Sunday morning, and you go, well, not my problem. You've got to back that up with your actions and your intentions as well. And we spoke about doing some research, seek advice, be curious. As I always say, the best coaches are curious beasts. I'm sure that you would have seen this before. When we think now about WWW, we think about the World Wide Web. Well, more than ever now, it's what went well. And this is a very common tool in elite sport now. A friend of mine was the athlete welfare manager for the Newcastle Knights, and he put me on to this. When he would talk to the players there, that's what he would ask them: what went well today? And because when he asked them, how are you, or how's it going, most people are going to dwell on the negative, or they're going to become insular. All right. It's like when you pick your kids up from school, the tone of your voice when you ask that infamous question, how was school? What did you learn today? What did you do today at school? I know all the parents on the call have faced silence or rolled eyes, or that they're probably the most famous answer, nothing. So they've been at school for 6 hours and they've done nothing. Well, it's a lot to do with how you frame the question. And it's the same as a coach with athletes. So, start adding that question to your vernacular. What went well today? You might play a game. I know the rep basketball's Friday night. You normally have training Sunday. Well, rather than have the post-mortem review, start with that. Hey, what do you think went well on Friday? I think it's a really good tool, and we've all been there, for the team that's getting beaten by 30, 40, 50 points every game. You get to training on Sunday, and those young players, they're dreading the review. Even if it's a 3-minute thing at the start of practice, they're dreading it because, what are you going to say? Yeah, we lost by 40 again, coach. Yeah, we got smashed again. So if you can turn the narrative and say, what went well, and then build on that, you've got to help young players explore the positives. I spoke to our Centre of Excellence women's program on Saturday, and they're struggling with COVID. And what I mean by that is they're restricted in their travel. They haven't been able to go home for holidays. They can't play any competition because the competition they're in has been cancelled. All the challenges that you're all facing in Melbourne, these young 16, 17, 18-year-old women are facing that too. So, I spoke to them about positive self-talk, and probably 15 years ago, I would have thought that was corny. But now more than ever with athletes, the ability for them to generate positive self-talk is really important. And I would encourage you as coaches, don't think anything is corny. Anything that has young people, talking about their situation is absolutely crucial. It'll impact their performance in a positive way, which is really important, but certainly not any more important than just impacting their overall their well-being. And this is something that coaches, me included, don't do well. You've got to practice what you preach. You've got to practice some self-care too. Everyone is busy, and sometimes coaches can be guilty of taking on the problems or taking on the challenges of the group that they're leading. So it's important as coaches that we find little cues to practice some self-care, and because if we can't do that, it's going to be very challenging and very difficult for us to impact positively the young players in our team. I'm not an expert, and again, I have coaches say this all the time. Look, hey, I'm not an expert. I don't know about this stuff. I'm not a counsellor. I'm not a psychologist. We're not asking anyone to be that at all. We're just asking you to be caring, empathetic leaders. Simple. And that's not that hard to do. You don't need to have a degree to do that. You just need to be authentic in your care for those around you. So what can coaches do? Yes, you're not an expert, but you can refer. As we said, if you see it or you sense it, either ask a question or refer. Refer it to the family in the first instance, of course, to club administrators. Often club administrators, and I know you've got some fantastic ones at your club. They've got tools that they've been in situations where they've managed these situations before. So don't be afraid to refer. And I very rarely does anything negative come out of referring and acting on that sense. Follow up is hugely important. And what I mean by that is if you sense that a player is not quite right, they're sad or they're a bit down, they're low on energy, and you might have a conversation. Well, the only way that conversation is going to have value if you follow up. The next time you see that player, you just check in again. If you have a conversation and you're still not quite sure, ring their mum or dad. Just the ability to follow up. So return calls, being proactive is really, really, really important. Again, do some research. We spoke about that. There's not an expectation and you get a PhD in psychology, but there's a lot of online resources, really useful, easy to follow, easy to access resources. And it just helps add to your toolkit as a coach. Confidentiality is always so important in any health or well-being environment, but sometimes coaches can be so worried about confidentiality that they don't refer or they don't bring people into the loop that can help. So obviously we also want to maintain confidentiality and privacy, but don't hide behind that. If you feel that you need to share it and bring others into the loop, and of course we need to maintain small loops all the time, don't try and take it all on and keep it all into yourself, because you can't be an expert in every field. And the last thing before we get on to any questions is modern coaching always comes back to more conversations. I wish I knew that when I was, I guess, in the midst of my coaching career. I'm a retired coach now, but let's spend less time worrying about baseline out of bounds and more time having conversations. I think that's really, really the big message from all of this. So, Nath, that's it for me. I don't know if you want to. I'll make you the host again. I'll stop this share, and if any of the coaches have got questions.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for that. That was awesome. There's a couple of questions in the chat, so I'll just read them out. First one's from Jared Keyser. In your opinion, would you shift from any sort of performance-based outcome need to occur on the other side of this current climate? Alternatively, will a competitive environment be healthy for a lot of athletes who haven't had it for 6 to 12 months?
It's a good question, and I guess the answer is both. I think they need, one of the big words now in coaching, Jared, at all levels is blend. What's the right blend? And if you listen to NBA coaches, they're often talking about, we didn't strike the right blend. And I think you've got to get a feel for it. Certainly, I think that players will come out of this desperate to be competitive and to do what they love and to do all the things that young athletes want to do. But I think being conservative is going to be important too. I think you as a leader just being conservative and maybe trying to keep the focus on process rather than competition is probably the balance slightly this way, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Caleb Foster, what are some good ways to engage young athletes while in lockdown other than Zoom?
Yeah, I think it's funny. Here we are on Zoom, and I think everyone's zoomed out. I think this is my 6th Zoom for the day. So I had to do some positive self-talk before I came on. Again, it comes down to conversations. I know sometimes it's difficult, but just, make a call and just say, hey, Sarah, how are you going with, things? I sent that workout out. Do you understand? And just try and make it a bit more personalised. And I know that's difficult because you might coach 2 teams, you might have 20, 30 athletes that you're sort of dealing with. But I do think people are zoomed out. And I think we need to get back to making more phone calls and just adding a bit of a personal touch to it. And I think also engaging them. I think it's also engaging them in fun things. And when I say fun, just different. But I think that it's time now for coaches to be really creative. I think the creative coaches are the ones who will come out of this thriving, the ones that can just spend some time in thought and do something a little bit different to stimulate the grey matter.
Thank you for that. Kane Washington, hey Pete, long time no see. One thing I see with young athletes is that they need competition to provide the motivation for development and improvement. Any recommendations for how to deal with this in the current environment and help them understand how important self-motivation is?
Yeah, and as we spoke about in the thing, Kane, it's a challenge for every single person. If you look at the AFL, some players came out of it, cherry ripe, didn't they? Come out of COVID just in unbelievable shape, but others just came out and you could see that their motivation had waned, and they're elite professional athletes. So one thing you can do to, I guess, replace the competition is put some metrics on improvement. Try and put some measures on. Okay, you're spending all this time, you're doing a lot of these individual workouts. That's why the home court app, and I know you guys have used that, is a great one. My 8-year-old tells me every second day, what record he beat, or he moved up from 7,252 to 7,251. It's a big day in our household. So, just trying to put some metrics on their improvement, so they're still aspirational. It's not about going and playing a really good game because they don't have games, but being able to see that the work they're doing is actually leading to improvement is one way to try and do it. That's what the Centre of Excellence programs did a great job when the kids weren't here of challenging them and giving them little targets, attainable ones, but ones that just stretch them a little bit.
Awesome. That's a great strategy. Thank you very much. That's it for the questions in the chat. I just want to say thank you again from all of us, and thank coaches for taking their time on a Thursday evening. It's always great to get some thought-provoking ideas and challenge the way we do things, particularly in this different landscape down here. So particularly, if anything to take away, it would be having more conversations. I think we've got another minute. Ryan just threw in a question though. So you okay with one more, Pete?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. As adults, it's easier for us to understand the benefits of focusing on the mental side of basketball in life. Do you have some strategies to be able to get this message across to younger age groups, under 12s and under 14s particularly?
Yeah, it's difficult because their cognitive capabilities are different to adults, as you say, Ryan. So I know this sounds a corny answer, but it works for Steve Kerr, so I'm on board for it because it seems to work pretty well for him. But with 12s and 14s, focus on joy. And I don't mean joy like, silly games and playing dribble knockout for 25 minutes and whatever else, but really celebrate the joyful side of it, and maybe allow them to be a bit more expressive and creative once they come back to basketball, and celebrate that, so they realize it's okay to do that. And it just basically what it is you're tricking them into being happy. And I don't mean that in a flippant way, but, you're linking basketball with a joyful environment. And, if you've read anything about the Golden State Warriors, that's one of their key themes is joy. So I just think creativity, as I said, do some different things at practice, maybe spend 10 minutes on drilling behind the back passes. I know we would cringe if they pulled it out, 12 months ago, but I think as we come back, we're all going to have to give the players a little bit more joy to what they're doing.
Awesome. Thank you. There's been one more thrown in. They're coming in late. Steve Wilson, what are the best metrics that translate to gameplay improvements? So I assume that's through like training through their environments.
Yeah, well, I like to talk about TST, so time, score, or target. So just set up drills that have got a time component, because our game is so dictated by time with, shot clock and 3 seconds in the key. Score, obviously, first to whatever, and target. Okay, what we would do a lot is we'd set up a drill and we'd provide them with a target that we thought was pretty close to being attainable, but maybe a stretch, just so that they continue to stretch on that. So, and just get them to record it. It's nothing major. When they come back to, even if it's non-contact, and we're still in non-contact pretty much here at the Centre of Excellence, we try and score decision-making. So if a young player in a drill makes the appropriate decision or the appropriate read, that's equivalent to making a basket. So just try and, be creative and inventive with it. But, the coaches here have done is they've put a weight on what they want to see happen. So if someone does a great closeout and contains it, that's the equivalent to a basket. And it just changes their view about things a little bit.
Awesome. That was terrific and great thought-provoking ideas there. I think that's it. There's been no more questions thrown in the chat. So thank you again for your time, Peter. It's greatly appreciated. If anything, the coaches take is just have more conversations and just get out there.
Yeah, no, thanks, Nathan, and thanks to Anita. We go a long way back, so I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you all. As I said, the thoughts of everyone at Basketball Australia is certainly with you all, and I look forward to being able to do a clinic in person, maybe sooner rather than later down there. So stay safe, guys.
Thank you again, Pete.